The story of the Rebbe's life parallels the story of Judaism in the 20th century. He was born in Tsarist Russia at the turn of the century, a descendant of the first Rebbes of Chabad. He survived the murderous pogroms that swept through Tsarist Russia in the early 1900s. As the Communist Revolution began to take root and power was seized by the Bolsheviks, he watched his parents walk the halls of power, fighting for the rights of Jews and Judaism. As a teenager during World War I, his home was a center of relief efforts for the tens of thousands of Jewish refugees who flooded their city. In his 20s, he met and studied with the Torah giants of his times. He married the daughter of the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe in a wedding attended by Jewish leaders from far and near. Living in Berlin during Hitler's rise to power, he witnessed firsthand a modern society turning against the Jews within it. He escaped Paris only days ahead of the Nazi advance into the city, then crossed the Atlantic on one of the last civilian vessels to leave warlocked Europe. When he arrived, his father-in-law placed him at the helm of Lubavitch's newly founded educational, social, and publishing departments. As the center of world Jewry shifted to the United States, he became the leader of the Lubavitch Hasidic movement. At the time, his strategy was considered risky, even dangerous. He taught his followers, in addition to focusing inward on improving themselves, to bring Judaism outward, pioneering the concept of modern Jewish outreach. As hundreds of thousands of Jewish pioneers moved to the Holy Land, he engaged and corresponded with their leaders. During peace and conflict, he embraced the people and the land of Israel. In evolving attitudes and trends, he managed to identify a yearning for something higher, endeavoring to quench the thirst with increased spirituality and morality. Under the noses of brutal dictators, he ran a network of clandestine operatives. As Jews began to enjoy a freedom unseen in hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, he proclaimed that moral people must be a light unto their neighbors, promoting the 7 universal laws for all of humanity. In a century which saw more scientific advances than thousands of years before it, he embraced what others shunned, encouraging that technology be used in the service of its creator. As travel and communication made the world smaller, he inspired thousands to reach out to their brethren in love, as they had once been chased down in hatred. The Rebbe spoke precious little about himself, so his life has never been properly documented. Rather, it is impressed on the hearts and minds of those who encountered him through the years. After his passing in 1994, the story of his life continues through the countless lives he has touched and inspired. My Encounter with the Rebbe is an oral history project geared at documenting the story of the Rebbe's remarkable life. This is not an official biography of the Rebbe. Rather, it is a glimpse into these individuals' own encounters with the Rebbe.
נחמן היה אומר, מספר לנו שכשרב לייביק היה רב של הקהילה, אז ורב לייביק היה כידוע, מי שרואים עכשיו את הספרים שלו, הליקוטי לוי יצחוק, אז כשהיה אומר לפני הקהל, הוא היה אומר עניינים בקבולה. האנשים שם היו פשוטים, לא כל כך פשוטים, אבל לתפוס את השטף של רב לייביק בקבולה ואת כל הביורים שלו, לא היו מסוגלים. והרב היה ילד ב-12, ב-13, הוא היה גם עומד ליד השולחן ושומע. אז פעם שאלו את רב לייביק, בשביל אתה מדבר את זה? מי מבין אותך? אז הוא הצביע על האצבע, מספיק לי שהוא מבין אותי. שהוא קלט את הכל מה שהוא אמר. זה בשמחה גורדצקי, אז ירגן נסח ברב לייביק נשתום. Reflektoren, ik ben als leerjaar van Friedrich Reb nach Geld voor die theorie. Reflektoren, ja, getraind is daar van Levik, Reflektoren van machen Geld. Is er eingestorben, aber Levik nicht gestorben. Ich habe sehr viel gesagt. Das erzählt er mal, dass Hannes ist in Luther, der mal eingeführt. Gegeben die Tier gewesen, wieder Rebbe. Da habe ich nicht mehr weg, da habe ich gestanden, da sehe ich auch am Wand. Der Rebbe steht und sagt, steht und sagt und sagt und sagt und sagt. Rieker gewesen, als sie gab es als diese Kinder, Wochenlachen, Spielzeug. Gucken auf die Sterne, wie viel das singen. Das ist mir jetzt vor dem Simchen, Junge. Ich sag mal, der Rebbe, das ist mit der Chaga, ich stehe mit dem Simchen, und dann sagt er, wie viel das Sänger ist, du? Weiß ich nicht, du sag ich das. Ich sag mal, von Seite aus, er sagt, das ist ja mal bei Kiddisch Levon, ich stand in Dreußen, ich dachte, bei Nacht, finster. Das ist gar die Levon, mit den Sternen, fragt es mir, nur, wie viel der Sänger? Da habe ich getan, ich habe gesagt, Punkt, wie viel der Sänger?
Ja, 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 ram, ja, 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 da 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 ja, ja.
Our first visit was always the visit to Rebbetzin Khan. We knew that the Rebbe is coming every day to see the Rebbetzin, his mother. He used to walk on the right-hand side on Eastern Parkway. And we tried to go on the other side, but we always came not the time when the Rebbe was there. As we came, she was so hospitable to us. She always set the table with cookies, with small fruits, with candies in little dishes. Even I have to tell you, she always gave me home a few cookies and a little plate, which I always save the plate till today. And she always tell about her son. As I saw that, my son. And I just tell you one of the stories. I will not tell you many, because she told us a lot. She said, we live in Ekaterinoslav, and we have a small apartment. The apartment was not divided, the walls with till the ceiling. It was just partitions. As we came in our little apartment, was a little vestibule, where was standing a stand to hang up coats and hats. Then you came in our, like she said, dining room, stalo, where we ate. Then was a little partition they called the children's room. In Russian it says the детска, the children, the room for the children. And then was another room, a small room. As you know, Reb Leivik was always busy. He was the Rav in Ekaterinoslav, and he was always busy learning and busy with problems. The children was learning with Malamdim, which was, like she said, I never have to have tutors for my children. And she said one time, Reb Leivik had a friend. That I say Reb Leivik because Rebbetzin Chana used to say Reb Leivik. Has a friend who was a professor in the university there. He used to come once in a while, not so often, late, after the days of work. And we played chess. Chess was the most popular game this time by us. And he started to tell me a problem to Reblevich. Reblevich, we have a very difficult mathematical problem, and we can't solve it. And he started to tell word by word the problem. Then after late at night he left. The Rebbetzin Chana said, this time we was fortunate, there was a telephone in the house. Late in the night, it was a winter night, and the coats was hanging outside. He called, Reblevich, the problem is solved. I found in my coat pocket a little note, and was written the whole problem. The Rebbe was a young child, but he was listening to the problem word by word. And he put in a small piece of paper and put in the pocket of this professor. So my son, the Rebbe, he was a prodigy. He was a very special young child. He was loved by people. He even saved once a little child from drowning. He was never seen if somebody was standing. He was different than all the children. He doesn't show it off, but his mother, said he was organized, he was polite, his books, everything was in a special shape. I never find a mess in his room. Everything was on the place. Everything was on time. It was different.
Ay 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 da 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 ya na di di da da di di rai. Ay 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 da 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 oh ya do do. Ay 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 ay.
Someone came into the library and brought a copy of the original letter the Rebbe wrote to the Ragachover Goen. It was in 1925. The Rebbe still lived then in Dnepropetrovsk, Yekaterinoslav. And we saw right away it's the handwriting of the Rebbe. It was found in the archive of the Ragachover Goen. But on the end of the letter, it's a halacha letter. The Rebbe is asking him some questions and explaining his opinion about some subject in halacha. And then he signs by the end, M. Guraria. He wasn't married yet to the Rebbetzin, but he was then a chosen. And I didn't know why he used the Guraria name. And I thought maybe for some reason he used the name for other things also. I wasn't sure, but I thought maybe the Rebbetzin would know, even though she wasn't married, but she was then a Kale. And maybe she would know if the Rebbe ever used the name of Gurari in the period of Rashi, maybe for any reason. So I called her up and I just told her the story of the letter, and I asked her if she knows. So she tells me, I never heard, so I don't know, but I can ask him. Wait, I'll call you back and I'll ask him. I was then shocked. I didn't mean you should call the Rebbe and ask him. I just asked if you remember he should use the name. That's it. So she tells me, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. And 50 minutes later she calls me back and she tells me, I called the Rebbe, which means he was in the office and she was home, and she called him in the office just to tell him what I asked. I was shocked, I couldn't believe it. Then she tells me the Rebbe answered me that he couldn't remember the details. So he says, why don't you please show him the letter and maybe he'll remember. So that's what I did. And I wrote it to the Rebbe, and I asked him if he wrote this name just for avoiding the censor. If they will see a letter that is being sent from Schneerson, they'll just stop. So they wrote Gur Aryeh. In Dnepropetrovsk then lived a Lubavitcher Chassid by the name Mordechai Gur Aryeh. He then, later he drowned, and his son is now the Rov in Chevra Shas and Kingston. So, since he didn't want to write a letter with the name of Schneerson, he wrote a letter of signing Gur Aryeh. So I asked if that's the reason or any other reason, and the Rebbe okayed that the reason was for the censor he didn't want to write the name of Schneerson. But since already the Rebbe told me I should show him the letter and ask him, so I took my guts and I asked him, since the Rebbe wrote to the Ragachover, probably the Ragachover answered to the Rebbe. Does the Rebbe have the letters of Ragachover or other letters that the Rebbe wrote to the Ragachover that I would incorporate? And the Rebbe answers me, Lechapes be'archion, to be checked in the archive. I didn't really know what it means. If he means the archives in the library, obviously I checked and there is nothing there. If he means the archive in his house, what is he telling me that to look there? But probably it meant that it was in his house, but he didn't have the time to look for it. And he says, when I have the time, I'll look for it. We didn't get it then, but after Gimel Tammuz, in the house, in the archives, was found several postcards and letters from the Ragachover to the Rebbe, and they are now all published in the Reshimas, and also the letters of the Rebbe to the Ragachover are published in the Igros Kodesh.
Ay, 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 ya, ma, 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 ya, ma, ma. Ay, 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 ay. Ah, na, 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 no, ya, ma, 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 ya, ma, ma, ba, ya, ya.
Я расскажу об одном эпизоде. Я был еще маленький. И у Менаха Мендела была свадьба в Варшаве. В Варшаве была свадьба его. Но ни нашего Рава, его отца, Левика, не пустили в Варшаву, не выпустили из Советского Союза, ни его жены. И у него было 2 брата, их тоже не выпустили туда. Никого. Что сделал Левик? Вот он знал, в какое время, точно в этот день, в этот час и в ту минуту, когда в Варшаве под Купой стояли его сын Менаха Мендел и его невеста, мы ее звали Хая Мушка, так? Вот, так ее звали. Они стояли в то же мгновенье. Началась свадьба, но без жениха и невесты. В доме у Левика, в его квартире. Мы были там. Я был, папа, мама, дедушка мой был. Но дети там недолго были, потому что было вечер уже поздно. Детей собрали на следующий день. Я очень хорошо помню, мне это врезалось, во-первых, на вечере, что было. На вечере выступил Левик, сказал, что хотя мы не с тобой, но ты с нами. Вот. Все мы тебя приветствуем и так далее. И сказал слова о том, что никакие расстояния не могут отдалить наши души друг от друга. А на следующий день собрались дети. Это было уже часов 9 или 10 утра. Собрали детей за стол. Был сладкий, прекрасный стол с еврейскими вот, прелестями. Вот. И Реб Левик с нами разговаривала его жена. Да? И речь зашла о том, что каждый ребенок что-то может, он талантливый по-своему. Да? Значит, Левик говорит, вы не стесняйтесь, мы знаем, что вы все умеете петь, танцевать, а кто не умеет, научится, потому что все еврейские дети по своей родословной, они все поют, и все играют, и все танцуют. Ну, кто из вас хочет петь? Я вызвался для начала. Пел там. Потом меня так это втянуло, что хотя какого-то голоса у меня такого особенного нет, вот, но я с удовольствием, искренне, честно так пел эти еврейские песенки, хасидские песенки. Реб Левик с нами, и его жена, и взрослые, кто привел нас туда, вдруг все пустились в пляс, все танцевать.
Ich bin die erste Zeit, wo ich dort gekommen. Und wenn ich bin gekommen in Europa, ist es ein bisschen mit der Trask. Weil ich komme von Amerika, junge Rauf, es ist eine ganze Mess. In jener Zeit ist gewesen eine Schiebe in Bruna, unsere Lubavitch, das ist gewesen. Und eine Schiebe gewesen dort in jener Stadt Montreux. Und ist der Schiebe. Und ich bekomme Hasmone, als zu der Öffnung von der Schiebe, ich soll ich kommen und ich will begrüßen, ich soll etwas sagen, advertieren. Nun, versteht sich, dass ich bekomme als Asmone, wir kommen in New York und ich bekomme Heroe. Also ich will fahren und mit mir viel so getan, ach, ich kenne das in der Almeises. Sie doch öffnen das Schir, hat mir so getan, was sie soll reingucken, was sie soll zugreifen. Und gewähne in der Jude Eber, wer ist der Jude Eber? Gewähne Rashive. Ich vernehme Fran a Sefer, ob ich durchgucke, sitze ich in Train und ich habe zugegriffen durch die ganze, weil man sitzt zwischen fremden Menschen, darf man doch etwas kennt machen, solche Stück wie ich mache da, man darf doch etwas zugegriffen. Und man sitzt dort in die Schuhe hier und von anderen Eltern, weil das ist die Psyche von der Yeshiva. Und stellt sich weg, der Weinberg, und hebt dann Reden. Und was redet der Mini, was ich habe zugeredet. Und fragt den Kasche und fragt noch eine Kasche und noch eine Kasche und noch eine Kasche. Und ich fühle, als trägt noch ein paar Minuten. Ich habe überhaupt was zu sagen. Ich kenne doch nicht, es ist passend. Was wird das sein? Mit einmal stellt sich weg und sagt dort zu sein Gabel, soll bringen ein bisschen Wasser, fühlt nicht gut. Und ist geworden ein bisschen bleich als im Pony. Und wartet eine Weile. Und sagt, kann mir nicht machen, ich habe weggesetzt. Ich habe doch schon gesehen, was der tut sich. Ob ich gehe mal eine Stelle weg, und ich habe gemacht, das Hackel von den Kasches, und ich gehe mal Territz, ich habe gesehen, dass alle sind gesessen. Und auch viele der Weinberger ist gewesen. Es ist alles geendigt, sie sind sehr fein. Es ist der Weinberg, und so dort zu die etliche Chashuvim dort, na sie können reingehen zusammen in Zimmer. Es ist ein Kibbut-Gitter, gewinnt auch dem Choshev. Und zu mir geht es auch ein Kerl, sagt ihr seid noch jung, aber gemacht hat er Eindruck, lernt mir echt herein. Bin ich herein und sitzt dort mit den etlichen Schuhen von Europa und Tschechien zu reden. Und der Weinberg sagt auf mir, also ich habe auf ihm gemacht, sehr gewaltigen Eindruck. Und ich kann ihn fragen, was ich will. Was der gemeint, ich will ihn fragen, ob es eine Kasche dort und mir getan seine Geschäfte. Okay, oh, sehr gut. Oh, sag ich kann fragen, was ich will. Ja, frage ich ihn. Also ich habe gehört von einem Maid, was jener hat mir gesagt, dass der Rebbe, der Lubavitcher Rebbe, hat Smicha vom Weinberg. Kennen mir erzählen die meisten? Oh, sie sagt Al Capone macht es bekisse, erzählt als sie haben gehabt, bis Medrischel Rabbonim in Berlin, noch fahren willkommen. Mit einmal kommt ein German und sagt, ist von Russland und wegen seiner Sprache will er nicht reden. Aber als er darf da bleiben und auf gehobenem Aufenthalt zu können bleiben in Berlin, ist, wenn hat das Smiche von Bismedrischel Rabboni von Weinberg, ist derjenige, von der wollte bleiben. Hab ich ihm gesagt, sagt Weinberg, wie gesagt zu dem German, na gut, ich will euch verhören, ich will sehen, sie fragt der junge Mensch, wie wird mir verhören? Nun, mit nehmen ein Stückchen Gemorre und sagt, das sind für mir. Der junge Mann sagt, das ist der Rebbe, das sind für mir. Wie will ich verhören? Sagt wir sollen nehmen dem Jemflug da rauskommen, das ist ein Journal von Rabbonim, und Weinberg wird jeder Chedisch reinschreiben. Hat ein German gesagt, wir nehmen einen von den Journalen, von seinen Teres, und mit ein bisschen reden wegen dem. Hat ihn rausgenommen, das Journal, sagt in ein paar Minuten geht mir als ein Apatschenplätze, habe ich vor mir gesehen, ein Goen-Elam. Das ist der Lubavitcher Rebbe, auf dem geben es mir.
I came to learn the Yeshiva Montreux. My father brought me, I was very young, 13 years. My father brought me from Zurich to Montreux. Eine Woche in Rheinland. There was Rabbi Weinberger, eine Woche. And he was talking, discussing with my father. So I would ask him, Tate, so it was Rabbi Weinberg, der größte Rabbi Weinberg, der Gordel, der größte Gordel. So ich, und Rabbi Weinberg, Tate gesagt, Rabbi Weinberg, sagt zu mir, Karif, mein Sohn, seht zum Scheich, sagt, great, stark Litzisch. Yeah, so I came often home in his house, Rabbi Weinberg. I was learning with Shiurim. Ich begann spazieren, I wasn't walking when I finished Shiva homes, I walked with him. So we discussing, learning, and verschiedene Sachen. And then he was mentioning me, it was just the years, the days, the Lubavitch Rebbe gone Rebbe, a few 2 or 3 years he was gone Rebbe. So he mentioned, then I was asking him, do you, Rebbe Weinberg, you have contact to the Lubavitch Rebbe? He said, no. But he told him then, why? He's my Talmud. So, the Lubavitch Rebbe a Talmud for Rav Weinberg? So, yeah. So, nu darfst du erwarten, die Kasche, wo hat der Rebbe, Rav Weinberg, kein Kontakt zum Rebbe. Ich würde sagen, Ich würde sagen, sagt Rav Weinberg eine Woche, ist mein Talmud, sagt, wer soll sie geworden, ein Talmud? Kommt zu mir in ein Lehrerseminar und er soll lernen bei mir in ein Lehrerseminar. So habe ich gesagt, ich nehme nicht auf Stamm Talmidim, ich darf keinem verherren. Sagte, hat der Lubavitcher Rebbe gesagt, ja, verherrt mich. Sagte, wie soll ich euch verherren? Wo Rabbi Weinberg will. Sorry. Aber ich sagte, habe ich ihm gegeben, eine für meine kleines Formlich. Aber ich ihm gegeben, da lernst, ich will auch kein verherren, was du steht in meines Form. So, der Lubavitcher Rebbe took this, and he was learning the whole night, das ganze Sefer auswendig by heart. You know, in the morning came every word, the Lubavitcher Rebbe knows by heart. So der Rav Weinberg was asking, so ich sage, er weiß alles, er sagt alles. Schau, habe ich ihn reingenommen. Er hat gekannt, das ganze Sefer von auswendig, habe ich ihn genommen. Sag, na, jetzt Rav Weinberg, die Kasche noch größer. Talmud, was hat er nicht der größere Rebbe? Was hat er nicht keinen Kontakt zu der Lubavitcher Rebbe? Sagt, ich würde sagen, ich würde sagen, so hat er mir gesagt. Ist mein Talmud. Ich würde ihm schreiben, davon schreiben wir Rav Agona, Tzadiger. Von mir, ich kenne das nicht schreiben. Talmud, ein realistischer Rav gehen. Und nicht schreiben will ich nicht. Passt nicht. Nicht schreiben, kein Titel im Lubavitcher Rebbe sagen, will ich nicht. Na, schreibe ich nicht. Das hat der Rav Weinberg mir gesagt. Aber er hat mir zugelegt, er ist ein Ademgottel. Dann ist er meistens, es hat Jahren früher, dass der Vater bekommen. Er ist ein Ademgottel, ein größer Talmud-Kocher.
I read the book, and one of the things I noted in the book was that the Rebbe had spent some time in Berlin, and during that time in Berlin he had gone to the shir of Rabbi Chil Yaakov Weinberg, author of the Sridei Eish, and somebody who was a Talmud of Slobodka, a very famous Rav and a Magid Shir. But the reason I knew his name was because my grandfather had studied exactly at that time in the Berlin seminary, the Hildesheimer seminary. I found that very interesting, and in fact there was a picture there of the Bochrim of the Berlin seminary, and I thought, just like see for interest, I'm going to take it to my grandfather. I'm going to see if he's in the picture. So I took the book to my grandfather, and it generated a discussion about the Lubavitcher Rebbe being in Berlin. First of all, my grandfather wasn't in the picture, but he named a few people in the picture who he recognized. And then I said to him, do you remember that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was in Berlin during this time? He said, of course I remember. Mendel Schneerson. What? I said, what? He said, yeah, he used to come to shir every day. He stood at the back on a stender. And the Rebbe used to give, and when he said the Rebbe, he meant his Rebbe, Rabbi Chil Yaakov Weinberg, used to give a shir for 2.5 hours, Iyun shir, I think 4 times a week. And this was a son-in-law of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. We all knew who he was, and he used to come, he used to stand in the shir. I said, what did he look like? So he said, he looked very modern. We were very surprised, because us German Bochum, we had a very firm picture of what Ostjuden looked like. Even the Ostjuden who lived in Berlin were all looked like what we imagine Chassidim to look like, and he looked very modern. He had a very neat beard, and he had a big hat, a grey hat, and a big modern suit. For us, that was very strange. I said, what about in learning? He said he never asked in the shir. He used to wait till the end of the shir, and if he had any questions, he used to speak to the Sridei Eish in learning, sometimes for many hours after the shir. What was particularly interesting in this discussion I had with my grandfather is that my father was present at the same time. My grandfather was a very elderly man, and he was recalling things from the 1930s. And my father said to him, "How come, Daddy, that you never told us that the Lubavitch Rebbe was in yeshiva with you at the same time in the seminary?" So my grandfather said, "You never asked."
So Rabbi Weinberg said to me, talking to me about American Jewry, he said to me, in Yiddish of course, said to me, "I know the outstanding Rabbonim Gedolim in your country, and I know them because they went to school here in Germany, yeah? But only one of them emerged unscathed, you know. And that's the Rebbe."
Ay, 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 ya, ma, 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 ya, ma, ma. Ay, 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 ay. Ah, na, 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 no, ya, ma, 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 ya, ma, ma, oh, ya, ya.
I drove him home, and I drove him into from quite a trip, and then he told me, I asked him very simply, "What is your interest in the Rebbe? You are come from a Misnaglischer home." Very openly, I wasn't ashamed. "And what for shaykhs do you have to Hasidus?" You hear? So first of all, he says, "I was young, I learned Likutei Torah in Russia yet." Second of all, I want to tell you something. We were all together in Berlin, in the home from Rav Chaim Heller, something we used to sit and have lectures, have shiurim, and two things happened to me. Every day I used to see, every time I used to see the Rebbe go in a certain direction, not in the direction that when he went out from the Shia, not in the direction where he lives, but in a different direction. Well, I figured maybe he has to see somebody. I'm not have to spy on him. Then he said, I saw the same place every time. I became curious. Why does he go after the Shia, after the university to that place? After time there was a university lecture, or there was a class, he used to go to that direction. One day I made my business to see it. He used to go to the mikveh. The Rebbe used to go every time that he was in the university. He had a schlüssel, a key to the mikveh. He used to go to the mikveh Zachtoivel. And this is why he went always the same place. The mikveh was that direction, and the Rebbe saw him, and he said to me, I can't believe it, he says, that a man, after he listens to a lecture in the university, goes to mikveh. And a man like this, I respect and I admire. Then he says to me, I'll tell you something else. You know, there is a coffee club in Berlin. The coffee club consists of plain coffee, no cakes, no bread, no milk, nothing, just plain black coffee. And this club is open to certain people who can come and discuss certain matters. He says, I go, Rabbi Soloveitchik says, I go to that club at times, and also met the Rebbe. The Rebbe wasn't a Rebbe yet, he was a young man, very fancy dressed, he says, very summary, very this, very important. And we used to sit and schmooze about issues, about world issues, about politics. This was, for a while, I didn't see him. Not now. So I saw him on the street. I saw the Rebbe on the street. I walked over, I said, well, would you like to come and have some coffee? Oh, not today. Not today. Thank you. Fatih. A little later, a couple days later, I meet him. Would you like to have some coffee? Go and sit down. Not today. I said, maybe his broiges, his Rebbe, maybe he's angry with me. I can't believe that the Rebbe should. Finally, I came to the Seichel. It was Bahab. He was fasting. Imagine a Jew goes to university, dressed up very fancy,
like our Lord, he says, he looked very interesting. He goes to mikveh every day, he goes to the university, and noch more, much more. He fasts on behalf. I should have known why he doesn't want to come to the club. Maybe I have embarrassed him when I'll see him and Dr. I mentioned about it. Nah, Dr. forget about it. The Rebbe didn't want to talk about it. Didn't want to discuss the whole India. I want you to know that Rav Soloveitchik couldn't get that over, how betzinner, how quietly, how hidden the Rebbe was. He told the following story, that the Rebbe always walked with the Gemara, and any time that there was a discussion or anything in the class, the Rebbe looked into the Gemara. The professor got up from the seat and walked around, and suddenly he sees the Rebbe looks into a Gemara. So he says, young man, what kind of business is that? So what's the problem? Tell me what I'm talking about. So he told him. He almost fell down on the floor. You know, and Rabbi Soloveitchik said he could have also told him the Gemara at the same time, but he figured there's no one to talk to.
The year that there was the myth of the Rebbe was pushing that the community should write Sifrei Torahs to be mezaka many Yidden to write their names into the Sefer Torah. And the Rabbi Gerari Rashag called me up at that time. He's officially the manal of all the yeshivas which were under him. And Yeshiva Sachet Temimim, which was the Siyasat in Tovshin Dalet in 1944, was one of those yeshivas. Yet by the Friedrich Rebbe, where this yeshiva was the Siyasat. So he called me up whether the yeshiva would be interested in sponsoring the fifth Sefer Torah, as far as I recall, to write a new Sefer Torah. So that a lot of Yidden should be able to write in Oisius into the Torah. I said I readily accepted, and we made a whole pirsum. We came to Rav Soloveitchik to invite him to come to the affair. He didn't promise to come. At the end, he didn't come. He wasn't feeling well. Well, while we were there, we took this opportunity, and I asked him, Rabbi Soloveitchik, you were together with the Rebbe for so long, in the times, in the younger days, as it's known, the three Gedolim together studying in the university. And the Rebbe was one of them, and you were one of them. Tell us something about what happened those days. Life in Berlin. This was the Berlin University. Soloveitchik says to us, you know, Hasidim think, now that the Rebbe became Rebbe, he speaks every so often, you hear the Torah, Hasidus, that they see his godless. Mamish, they see all over, Kabbalah, Nigla, they see what a great Talmid Chacham personality he has. But as much as Hasidim think that know him, you should know he was an Ister in Berlin, and he's still an Ister. Hasidim think they know who he is. There's so much more about his godless. These were the words of Rav Soloveitchik. The Rebbe, as the way Rav Soloveitchik put it, had only two things in mind. Torah and mikveh. He was the only one in Berlin. He had a key to the mikveh. Every day he would go to the mikveh. He made it his business. He should be whatever he wants to go to the mikveh. And every day he used to go to the mikveh. Torah. Wherever he went, the Rebbe always had a sefer with him. To the extent, even when he was in class, by the lecture given by the professor, He would listen. He would only have to listen once. He heard what the professor preached, finished. Then he took the sefer out and started looking the sefer. To the extent the professor saw that he wasn't listening, so I guess he was a little insulted. He says, Schneerson, maybe you can repeat what we just lectured. The Rebbe stands up, word by word, he says over the whole lecture. Ever since then, the professor never bothered him. He went back to the sefer. Purim, in Berlin. It was already midnight. I guess it was already after the Rebbe was holding Ad Yoda already. It was Mekayim the Mitzvah Zayin. At the university, of course, students, they mingle around. He stands up on a chair at the university outside, and he starts to lecture, give a drosha about Purim. Many Jewish students, of course. And he was telling about Mitzvah Sayoy, about the union of hearing the Megillah. In Berlin, everything has to be official. If you want to preach, you have to have a license. Of course he didn't have a license. Leitaka, he's standing there on a chair, and the police arrested him. What's going on in the middle of the night in Berlin? They arrested him. They knew who his friends were. So they called up Rabbi Soloveitchik. They knew their buddies. So they, your friend, he's in prison now. He was lecturing here. Maybe you want to bail him out. Come right down. He came down. And of course he explained it's a holiday today, why he was doing it. When they went out, Rav Soloveitchik says to the Rebbe, you're going to be a Rebbe one day. The Rebbe says to him, what makes you say it? Because your grandfather was in prison, and your father was in prison, and you were in prison. It's assuming you're going to be a Rebbe.
Reb Chaim Heller at that time was the mechaber of the Sefer HaMitzvahs, but he was known as a Goan Olam, one of the great sages of the generation, and many, many young people who were scholars in their own right gave him the reverence and sat to listen to his discourses because he was an unbelievable Gaon sage, and all of those people who had really encyclopedic knowledge of Talmud and everything else came to listen to him giving his discourses, and but those who would get in were of limited number. One of the students who was learning by Reb Chaim Heller was Rabbi Yoshe Ber Soloveitchik, who was later on the famous Rosh HaYeshiva of Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elchanan, Yeshiva University. He described to me pretty much what happened when my father came to Reb Chaim Heller. He came in as a Hasidic bacher with a long coat and curled payas, and he tried to catch the eye of Reb Chaim. And when he finally caught the eye of Reb Chaim called him over and he asked him, Bacher, was hast du zu suchen? What are you looking for here? So he said that my Rebbe sent me to Nash from the Rebbe. My Rebbe sent me that I should pick up some bits and pieces from the Rebbe, referring to Reb Chaim Heller. And he asked him, Wer is our Rebbe? Who is your Rebbe? So he said, Reb Chaim Tobias. And when he mentioned Reb Chaim Tobias, Reb Chaim Heller Zatzal stood up, Malay Kaimam, and she was complete, stood up to show reverence to Reb Chaim Heller, and he said,
that he's an outstanding Talmud Chacham and Rosh Yeshiva. And he asked my father, "Was kann ich euch fragen? What can I ask you?" And he said, my father answered very expansively, "The Rebbe kann mir fragen, was will. The Rebbe can ask me whatever he wants." And he said, "Oh, sorry, like you would say with such a breitkeit, such an expanse, I can ask you whatever you want." And he happened to have, next to him there was a Mishnayos Taharis, and he opened up Mishnayos Seder Taharis, and he opened up to the hardest tract in Seder Taharis, which is Kalim, and he asked him to say Pshat in the two Mishnahs. He opened up at random and he asked him, "Zog me a Pshat in die zwei Mishnahs." And Rabbi Yoshe Ber told me that my father, without batting an eyelash, as you would say, nothing fazed him, looked at the two Mishnahs and told him Pshat in the Mishnah. He went then to the Rambam, the Mishnah Rechoshoina, Mishnah Achroina, the Tiferes Yisrael, and maybe one other one that I don't remember exactly who, and that both of them he was basically blown away and was aghast, and Reb Chaim said to him, to my father, Zechar Levracha, that ihr könnt dort bleiben, you can remain here, meaning that you passed the test and you can be part of this group. Und Tomazach episch schwer, in case you have any difficulties and you need to know Pshat, he pointed with his two fingers, ihr könnt fragen die zwei Leben, you can ask these two lions. And he pointed to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, and to himself, Rabbi Soloveitchik. My father never said anything that lavishing any praise on any people. But my father did tell me, I asked him if he ever learned with the Rebbe. He said no. Did he schmooze with him? Yes. And my father would tell me, ich kann meid sein. And I mean, you're not talking about a child, but you're talking about someone who Gedolim put a stamp on as being a tremendous Talmud Chacham. Ich kann meid sein, dass kennt kol ha-Torah kula. That on the Rebbe, that he knows kol ha-Torah kula. There's nothing that he doesn't know. My grandfather was also the Gabba of the Klois. He was the Baal Tefillah. He was a beautiful Baal Tefillah. People came all over the world to listen to him. He was a murdig Baal Tefillah. So one day, a younger man comes over to him, and he says that he wants to know that tomorrow he would like to give, the Lubavitcher Rebbe is going to be here in Berlin. He's coming. He would like him to have an aliyah. My grandfather didn't ask anything at all. Sure. The Frierdiker Rebbe was called up and had an aliyah, and I think he bench came up. I don't remember if he did or not, but I think what my recollection was that he did bench kaimo, and he asked, even though it was Monday or Thursday, he asked to make a mishaberach, and he called over my grandfather, and he said to him that he wants to be menada money because on top of the Aron Kodesh there were cobwebs, a little bit of plaster was falling, it wasn't nice, and he took out a 50 mark, which was a lot of money, and said to make sure to take care of the Bedek Habayis. And then he got to talk to him, and he said to me he wants to thank him for helping out one of his chassidim. So my grandfather says, "What's meant there? Well, who do you mean?" So he says that there's a bacher in a hospital, and really not too many people are looking after him, and you are on top with him, and it's very, very kind of you. My grandfather was shocked. He says, "Von wann weißt das der Rebbe?" You know, like saying, I mean, I can realize you're a Rebbe, maybe you're a sort in the Shemayim or something, but you know, how do you know? So he pointed to the Rebbe and he said, "Mein Edem hat mir gesagt." Up to that point, my grandfather did not know that the Rebbe was the son-in-law of this. I mean, he also came in and davened and did what he had to and left, and that was it.
Ay 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 da da la da ya na di di da da di di rai. Ay 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 da 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 da. Oh yeah do.
So one time I met Rabbi Yudel Gershoni, who was considered one of the biggest Elohim in all the Litvish yeshivas. He was a very big one. When he heard I was the Lubavitcher, he said, he'll tell me a story about the Rebbe. He said that the chasana that the Frierdiker Rebbe made of the last daughter, the Rebbetzin Shena, to Hornstein, his Rosh Yeshiva, Baruch Ber, was invited to the wedding. So he took along a few Bachim with him to be with him, to help him out and so forth. When they came to the town which the chassan was going to be, the Ozgenik, Reb Baruch Ber asked if Reb Chaim Mezer is here, and they told him yes, he's here. So Baruch Ber went to see Reb Chaim Mezer, and he took along Reb Yudel Gershoni. And all the time they spoke about the Rebbe, the Mesichus Nefesh, that the Rebbe had in Russia for Torah and Yiddishkeit. So when he left the room of Reb Chaim Mezer, Yudel Gershoni said, such a Rebbe I want to see. When he got in to see the Rebbe, he started to speak with the Rebbe learning. So the Rebbe said, if you want to speak learning, I'll send you to my younger son-in-law, and you'll tell him that I sent you, and he'll speak with you in learning. Yudel Gershoni did that. And he spent that's what Yudel Gershoni told me, he spent like 20 or 25 minutes with the Rebbe speaking and learning. And Yudel Gershoni said, what can I tell you? He had a knowledge of everything in Shas. But his way of learning is different than our way. But that's what he said. He had a knowledge of everything in Shas.
Ay 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 yam ma 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 yam ma ma ay 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 yam na 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 no yam ma 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 yam ma ma ay yam.
Our flat was a boulevard Saint-Denis. Anyway, it's near the Gare de l'Est. So, and the Bais Medrash was, say, for a normal man, that was the Bais Medrash from the Farriers and the Diamanters. That was the district from. And normally for Nats was 5 minutes. 6 minutes, but with him was nearly half an hour. But he walked it, and so, and we left him there. In the morning, we left before 9 o'clock. We left him there. Sometimes I stayed behind, sometimes the last Rebbe stayed behind to wait for him, till he put off his towels, which was around 2 o'clock. We had to wait to help him to take off the talus and put away. Talus was wet, especially in the front here. He was really a Kudish. Where I met the Rebbe, now speaking about the last Rebbe in Paris, always in intellectual circles. I remember there was a famous writer and speaker. He came and he gave a lecture about Chabad. So the Rebbe came, student, sit in the corner and listened. Didn't say a word, didn't ask any question, gut. He listened. You want to speak about Chabad, about Lubavitch? He listened. He was a very, very good listener. My brother, after the Shiva, my father said Shiva after his father. And after the Shiva, he went with some friends, it was the end of Hof, with some friends for a swim and got drowned. And the body wasn't found straight away, but after. But the Rebbe asked, wo is Rabbi Yankel? Wo kommt nicht zu Minyan? Ze is er schon noch the Shiva, after my father. So I explained to him what happened. Oi, wei, sagte er. Ich muss Menachem Uvel sein. And naturally with the ambulance, they brought him to the house there wasn't a lift even. It's on the second floor. And they had to call the police, because the Oilem had gehört that the Rebbe is in the center von Paris. So haben sie alle gewollt ihm sehen. The house, so the police kept away. When he came in, the Rebbe, so he asked my youngest sister, Malcha, who's Baal? Who's Baal? So I told him he is in Stockholm for business and so on. So he called the Rebbe straight away, the last Rebbe, and told him, schnell, telefonier zu Rav Zuber in Stockholm. There were two Schochten in Rav Zuber, Schöne Woche. He was killed in Chicago. And Chazdan, Shul Chazdan, he was the Chazen. And they were the Schritte. So straight away, he had to ring up Zuber. They should see that no one in the trade, Jew or no Jew, will let me know. He didn't want me to sit Shiva in Stockholm or to come even home for the Shiva. I must be out of Stockholm. So I come to Mincha Ma'ariv. So Zuber comes to me, he says to me, you know, what sits to do in Paris, in Stockholm? My father can be kind, he doesn't feel well. He told you that he won't send you goods for some time. So, you know what? My family are in Haparanda. That is the top of Sweden. That's where in July is there's no night. So, at least you will see something new. So went there till the Shloshim were over. Then I come home and I had the news and I sat Shiva for half an hour and so on. So go. But the Rebbe straight away, he could do Ayita Teuve, that straight away, immediately. As he came to see my father, the last Rebbe had to ring him up, Zuber and the other one, see that no one should, there is the paper for the fair trade there and all this, no mention should be about my brother. And he was known in the trade. So, but the Rebbe details. And so was the last Rebbe. Were very important. The smallest thing to do for a Faiz, for him, that was a große mitzvah. Anything, I observed it long time. So I'm not an inner Chabadnik, but for perhaps the outsider can see better than the insider. By the way, when they started to print the Mamurim, when he started to speak in the 50s, at the beginning, the first 4 volumes, the Rebbe sent me personally, but he didn't put it on the cipher, but the letter, I must have somewhere the letter. He appreciated my family and all this, so he sent it me privately the first 4 volumes.
Das erste Mal, wenn ich gesehen habe, Reben, ist gewesen, afghatigste nachts, wenn wir gekommen sehen, der Rebens Mama, hören dem Rebens Mama, und dort gewesen, der Rebbe gekommen von Paris, und der größte Beruf ist zufällig gewesen dort, der Schabser Rappaport. Zufällig ist gewesen, mein Tatens Rebbe, mein Tat Arvodislover. Und noch ein Name haben sich alle weggesetzt, schmissen und lernen. Und man hat geschmissen Schuhen. Mama ist mit geworfen und mit Schass. Das habe ich gesehen, das erste Mal im Reben. Und wir sagen, wir standen jeder einer mit einem Fies, auf einem Bänkel. Das zweite. Und als Moment hat man sich geworfen mit Lernen. Alle gestanden nach ihm und rausgehört. Gehört aus der Reden. Und so haben sie geschmissen, geworfen auf eine Halbschass. Hat auch geworfen. Und dann sind alle gestanden gesehen, wie sie sparen sich lernen. Und das habe ich gewesen. Also da wurde es aber auch gesagt auf dem Reben, er kann lernen. Das schmissen gewesen, so heuer in Lernen, der Leute muss schon nicht verstanden, was sie reden, aber sie haben gesehen, dass du redest sich wegen größeren Sachen. Man hat gesehen, was du zitiert, man hat geworfen, ich hasse, mit Teuswissen, mit allem Forschen. Und der Leute hat nicht gewusst, was du tut sich. Sie haben gesehen, beide sind größer London. Dann du im Größe. Und dann hat man gesehen, was der Rebbe ist.
I remember her telling me that when she was on the train, this is already now the occupation is full and engulfed. I mean, this is fully Nazi Germany, and they were checking her passport, her travel documents, whatever it was at the time. I guess some kind of passport plus maybe additional papers or something. And it turned either they asked her questions or some of it was even on the papers. She's a Schneerson. She's born, as they say in French, né Schneerson. Her husband is Schneerson, her father is Schneerson, her mother is Schneerson, her grandfather is Schneerson, and I think her grandmother is also Schneerson. The whole thing looked at them a little bit kind of suspicious, and I think just with big nissim, with miracles, she kind of survived it.
After his wife passed away, the Rebbe told him he had the machlos that when it used to catch something, he used to suffer from that. He had a din of, I was told by the doctor, the achelam isukin. So the Rebbe told him not to stay alone at home at night. Not to be alone. You should ask the Anholov in Yeshiva that to give him 1 or 2 bachrim that will stay in Yeshiva the whole day, but at night, instead of going to the dormitory, come to his house and sleep there. And I was the bacher. And then some months later, it was Emanuel Shochet also. Yeah. And as such, we used to, especially Friday night, used to spend time with him. And he used to tell me things. And this is where I learned a lot of the things about him and about the Rebbe and so on. See. One time he told me something that was spectacular, but yet I was wondering, where did he get this from? He told me that the Frierdiker Rebbe had a dream. The Tate is gekommen zu him. And he tells him, "Für was bist du unmittig? Für was bist du so unmittig? Als es leicht bei dir durch die Nacht." And the Frierdiker Rebbe woke up. So was Golem, the Tate. And they saw that the Levana shined rein in the room. So it's lichtig, he says. Yeah. But he says, nicht das the Tate gemeint. You know, it's not the Levana that this is it. So he got up from his bed and went looking in the house. And he saw that the Rebbe is sitting and learning in his room. The door is closed, not always. And the Rebbe sits to learn in the middle of the night. And he told me the story. Geschmack hem, meisten. Aber ich habe sich gewundert, I didn't ask him. Von wann weiß der das? Aber mit der Frierdiker Rebbe hat auch nicht erzählt das. Der Rebbe wird auch nicht erzählen das. Whatever, where did you get this, you know? He didn't tell me, and I didn't ask, but I was wondering where did he get this? And the Rebbe said on him that he's a Yisha Daikin. What he says, a Daikin and a Balsoid. The Rebbe said this by his, when he passed away. So I was wondering, after these stalkers found the Rishimas, yeah? In one of the Rishimas, there's a passage like this. This was in the Rishimas. So I assumed that the Iranian had heard this from the Rebbetzin himself, you know. And he didn't tell anybody. He told me this one of those conversations. He told me that he used to see the Rebbe in Shabbosim. He used to daven in another shul, not in the Lubavitcher shul, I think. He used to come there around Kriyas HaTorah, he said, in the back, sit in the back, stand in the back, and see, quiet. Nobody knew too much about him, and stay until after the davening, and leave. I'm gegangen davening, or something to that effect, and I say, und ich bin still, ich habe nicht gewusst zu viel, das ist he came raining when they visited their house. We saw the Rebbe always learning. Whenever he came into the Rebbe's house, the Rebbe was learning. You know, Agami was connected at that time with Sorbonne or what. One time he says that when he came in, he saw a sefer that he asked the Rebbe, what's the sefer? So the Rebbe said, this is the Avodas HaLevi von Rabban Starasheli. Zeer tiefe sefer. A very deep sefer. Zeer tiefe sefer.
Ay 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 da 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 ya na di di da da di di rai. Ay 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 da 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 da. Oh yeah.
This story was maybe told to me before Pesach or something like that because it was kind of relevant at the time, but also involving life under occupation, close to occupation, and so forth. The Rebbetzin told me that at a certain point the Rebbe took a cable car. In French, I think he called it téléphérique, and to try to find karpas for the Seder. Most of the world uses potatoes or onion, and some use celery. The Chabad custom is to have onion for karpas on the Seder plate, and the Rebbetzin said that he left on the cable cars, and apparently due to the situation and the cable cars themselves, most probably the Rebbetzin wasn't overconfident in that situation. And she says, he went to find onions somewhere far away, and she says, like, I didn't know if I was ever going to see him again. She totally was apparently frightened due to everything that was going on. And the Rebbe literally, I guess you could say, from what I'm hearing, endangered himself to what we would consider almost just a custom. Because it was obvious to me from the story that potatoes were available, but the Rebbe wanted to have what he believed was the custom, perhaps from his parents' home, perhaps from the previous Rabbi. And as subsequently the Rebbe wrote in Sefer Minhagim that our custom is that we use onion. In wartime, I guess there was a rule, a decree, that all gold needs to be turned over to the government. I would think most probably that would be the Vichy government. And either she told me that, or my understanding, you don't turn over the gold you have. It's a very serious crime. So a certain Jewish person who had a lot of gold to hide, and he was a businessman. So as things were getting tighter and things were getting more dangerous, he figured eventually it's going to be searched and it's going to be confiscated, to say the least, if not worse than that. So he figured that if he tried to put it in the possession or in the hands of someone who is not a businessman, namely students, in this case the Rebbe was a student, was a young man, a student who had just left Paris and was studying in France, in Paris, and he'd be safe there, or at least safe for now. So I basically came and asked the Rebbe if he can hide gold in the Rebbe's apartment, studio, or whatever it was. And the Rebbe said, yeah. So the Rebbetzin describes it that it was enough to fill up a closet, but she was using the Russian word, it's called a kladovka. As things started to get even more tighter, more dangerous, the Rebbetzin started to get worried over the situation, and I think part of it is the fact that the Rebbe could easily be identified as a Jew and as a Frum Yid. It most probably wouldn't be a very great idea to add to the problem if they found gold in quite a large sum hiding in his apartment or in his dwelling place. So at a certain point, the Rebbetzin got really worried, and she said maybe we could suggest him to find another place or something, because it's getting super dangerous or something like that. The Rebbe kind of said, like, es ist, mein Mann hat gesagt, dass es ist irdische Geld, und wir können das nicht honorieren. It's like Jewish money, Jewish value, and we just can't touch it. We just need to live it the way it is. So at a certain point, the owner of the fortune came, and the Rebbetzin said that he put it into tires to hide it, or he built it into tires somehow. And he managed to get it out, smuggle it out of France, and took it into Switzerland. And she wasn't sure if all of it got saved, but it was clearly that pretty much most of it got saved, and you could see she was very happy that it all materialized at the end.
Im Besmeidrich hat man ihm gesehen, nur Schabes zu Kriyas Teure. Fragt sich kommen, keiner hat nicht gewusst, wer ist. Was gewesen, umgekommene Menschen von verschiedenen Plätzen. Einer hat nicht gekannt, dem Zweiten. Und wenn ist reingekommen im Besmeidrich, ist geschehen bei den Tieren. Wer ist reingekommen, hat sich umgestoßen in einem So, hat nicht gesagt, kein Covid. Und ist so weggegangen, durch Christa Teil ist weg. Wenn ich gewesen dort, in Besmeidrisch, ist sie gekommen, ein älterer Jid. Und hat mir gezeigt, hat mir gefragt, ich bleib du, sie gewesen, Shabbos Bereshis, im Jahre 40. Shabbos Bereshis, sie gewesen Shabbos, dachte ich, Shabbos gleich noch Jontef. Und jetzt sind wir gekommen, und sagt mir der Teufel, Gerbach hat mir gegeben ein Päckl mit Schriften. Sagt mir, Gerbach, du, die Gsuvim, behalte sie, ich hätte kommen, am nächsten Mal es mir zurückgeben. Und ich nehme die Gsuvim, ich kicke rein, sehe dort Sachen, die ich nicht gewusst, die ich nicht verstanden. Für Chameluchem, mit Schrufem, mit Erfahren. Ich gewartet, ich wollte treffen dem Jid. Ich wollte fragen ihm, wegen der Gsum, wo du es ist. Ist nicht gewesen. Nein, ich habe es noch ein paar Shabbos, ich bin weiter gewesen. Ich gekommen, sagt mir, wie hat meine Gsum, gib mir meine Gsum. Aber ich gesagt, oh, ihr seid du, sehr gut. Ich will, ihr sollt mir sagen, wo du stehst. Das sind Sachen, was ich verstehe nicht. Er lachte, er sagte, das ist Chassidus, Lubavitch Chassidus. Hat er mal willst lernen, das zu stehen, gehe dort nicht weiter gewesen, der Hotel, wie der Rebbe hat gewohnt. Geht dort darauf, du ein German, bei ihm hätte ich schon sagen, alles. Und da bin ich, ich habe gewesen ein Ingerbucher, ich habe gewesen ein schwer zu gehen, stammt sie ein Mensch, was ich kenne nicht.
We smuggled ourselves from the occupied zone to the unoccupied zone. Marseille was the unoccupied zone because Marseille was a port, but in the southern coast, on the Mediterranean. We arrived in Marseille after Shavuos, 1940. Dort gewesen ein Jid Franz, ein chassidischer Jid, auch ein Galizianer Jid, feiner Jid gewesen. He had a little restaurant. Man dort kennt essen, er hat gerade eine Scheuche dort, man dort kennt essen, ein Kusher-Stückchen Chicken mit chassidischer Jid gewesen. And he also had a Besmeidrish, and 2 streets further down he had a Besmeidrish, and that Besmeidrish was in the Rue des Convalescents. We damped there. We lived a little bit more uptown, but we damped there, so you know, Geschmack Besmeidrish. There was another reason why we damped there, because during the war, Marseille was a center, people ran out from northern France, from Belgium, so still people came in. In the beginning, the first year of the Germans, you could still slip out. It wasn't easy, but you could slip out. And there were people, and everybody came. The first place they came was in the Besmeidrish. I feel Menschen that hadn't gone to Besmeidrish for 30 years already. But there, people want to find out, did you see my brother? Did you see maybe one lost a wife, one lost a son on the road, and things like that. They want to find out with their families. Then they also wanted to find out which consulate you can go. Maybe you get South American papers. Maybe we can get out for here through Spain and Portugal. So anyway, all the information between Mincha and Maariv, it was like a marketplace in that Besmeidrish, a market. Nobody touched the Tillim or Chumash or Gemurah to learn. Everybody was busy. My grandfather also came there, my grandmother, and they lived in our house, in the same apartment where we lived. And my side, that gegessen, ganz noch Mütting gelernt, from 4 to 7, I learned by my side. And that's where I saw the Lubavitcher Rebbe the first time. I didn't know who he was. A younger man, a soft head, a beard. You could see the beard he hadn't touched. It was, it wasn't touched. But in a modern suit, with a necktie, nice necktie. And he came in,
he greeted everyone. Somebody said, good morning, lechem sholem. He didn't speak with anybody. He used to sit down in the corner. And between Mincha and Maariv, it took usually 30, 40 minutes. While all the other people were talking, it was like, I say, a big marketplace. He was sitting in a corner. He always had in his pocket here, he had, before the war, there was a Mishnayos, Schlesinger it was called. It was a publishing house in Vienna. And they printed most beautiful Mishnayos. Siddur Mishnah in one volume, very thin paper, but small. And he had that always in his pocket. He took that out and he was studying Mishnayos. Learning Mishnayos, always was sitting and learning Mishnayos until the came back up and Shulchan, he got down Maariv, so he put away the Mishnayos and davened and then went home. I knew there was a younger man, I didn't know who he was. There were other people, I didn't inquire. I was a boy of 18 years old. So, but one afternoon, my Zayde said to me, Aaron, wer der younger man is. I want to know who that younger man is. All right, I'll try. And nobody was there. 7 o'clock, people walked in. This one said this. Nobody knew. Apulit, also a refugee. Till I finally found somebody who told me, I think his name is Schneerson. Now, the word Schneerson didn't mean much to me. Ich bin nicht Lubavitcher Chassid. Ich habe gekannt, in Antwerp, before the war, gedenke ich ein Jid Lubavitcher Chassid. Das gedammt, in dem größten Besmetterisch dort. Es heißen Lagovir, gedenke ich. Remember, dem Jid gedenke ich weiß, ich bin Lubavitcher Chassid. Wenn es geschrieben mal Chabadnik, nicht Chabadnik. Man sei dort ja gewiss. Man sei dort, sagt er, wir sahen nach Chabadske Einike. Ich habe gekannt auf dem Punem, sagt er, auf der Zira, das ist ist von einer größten Jiches. Man sagt, ich bin Aita Butler. Ich bin größter Amtruhen gewesen, aber Aita Butler. Kein Mensch gewesen im Business, kein Mensch gedient. Alle Kolleginnen haben gesessen gelernt. Aber ich sehe die Schieden, hat eine scharfe Nuss. They smell. Schön, aber schön. Dann, guck mal, das ist der Lubavitcher Rebbe. So I started paying, the Seite hat mir gesagt, ich so certain an Huges. Siehst du, was er so ist? Das hat er gesagt. So, I started observing him a little bit more.
When the Frierdiker Rebbe in 1930 went for 10 months to Israel and the United States, he left the Rebbe for safekeeping for the whole collection. And the Rebbe then wanted for himself a copy of all these manuscripts of the Chassidus of the Rabbeim that are not published yet. So he then copied. It was then, in the 1930s, it wasn't easy to copy. But he copied the whole collection of what he wanted. And then, in the next years, he was working on this collection of copies that he had for himself. And he was preparing a topic index on Alter Rebbe's Memorim, on the Tanya, Teroer, Likutei Torah, and some more of the Rabbeim, but mainly on the Rebbe Rashab. The Rebbe was also editing a list of all the Maimorim of the Frierdiker Rebbe, but not a subject index. He prepared the index that was published later. But actually it was unbelievable that in the same period he took the manuscripts of the Rebbe Rashab, which are the deepest biurim in Hasidus that we have, and he learned it from manuscript, and he learned it in a way he should be able to edit a index, a subject index, where in each place he not only writes where he discusses it, he writes in 2 words what he discusses there, which he needed really to learn that and understand that. And the same period that he still has
tests in school to make, and he still has correspondence with his father in Kabbalah, and still correspondence with the Frierdiker Rebbe, and all the editing of the Frierdiker Rebbe's Maimorim was done by him with this writing the footnotes and the sources for it, not to understand how this could be done by a human being in the same period in different fronts and being so successful and so unique in each part. I had no other way just to write, but the end that when you see all this, you say, as the Rebbe wrote once about the Alter Rebbe, Hine ish plois. Here you see a human being which is completely not for us to comprehend how he could do that. Later, when he already became Rebbe and he gave to print many Sforim, he also gave to print his index that he did. Part of the index was on published books, like the Tanya, Teroer, Likutei Torah, and some of it was on the Maimorim of the Frierdiker Rebbe and of the Rebbe Rashab that was not published yet. So he gave to publish this index when we still didn't have published the books itself. It was after I finished working on the Rebbe Rashab's letters and I started working on the Frierdiker Rebbe's letters. The Rebbe told me, just wait, because in a week or two I'll bring you more. So I was waiting. 2 weeks later, the Rebbe came from the house with 2 large archive boxes, and he gave it to me. It was the archives of the letters that he was being Mesader, he was gathering and being Mesader still in Poland in that 10 years. It was then the schedule that the Frierdiker Rebbe told the secretaries that every letter that I write, and it's not only a blessing, it's a letter that has some Torah in it or Teichen in it, make an extra carbon copy and send to my son-in-law, the Rebbe. He had all the Michtovim Teichnim, letters that have a special Teichen, and whenever he felt a letter should be published of that collection, he would edit it and give it for publishing in the journal that came out then by the Frierdiker Rebbe called Atomim. He had a staff, and the Rebbe was the unofficial head staff editing the more important material. So since then, the Rebbe had in his house a whole collection of hundreds of letters of the Frierdiker Rebbe with the index that each letter, what it's about, and when it's from, and to whom it is. So this collection, the Rebbe brought with him from Paris to Vichy, and from Vichy to Nice, and from Nice here to the United States. And it was for many years in his house. All the material, including all the copies of the Maimorim of the Rebbe Rashab that he copied for himself, he also brought it. So there was a lot of material. He had a lot of suitcases of all this material that he needed to have. In the suitcases he didn't have only his pants and coats. So that's why when he finally got in the middle of the war with all this material from Paris to Vichy, he needed a horse and a wagon to put them all on it. And finally, through this whole journey, everything he brought here and he kept in his house till the time came that he brought it from his house to give me for safekeeping in the library and for editing the very useful series of volumes of Igros Kodesh.